Most of the time, the truth is not hiding. We are. This is You're Probably Right, a podcast about relationships, responsibility, and the stories we tell ourselves when reality gets uncomfortable. I'm Michael Charles Murray. Let's get into it. You know, I've spent a lot of time talking about relationships on this podcast. I've talked about rejection, avoidance, inconsistency, people pulling away, people coming back, people saying one thing and doing another, and all the confusion that comes with trying to make sense of somebody who seems to care about you but doesn't consistently act like it. And somewhere in the middle of all of those conversations, I realized there was another question underneath it all. What happens when caring about someone slowly turns into carrying them? Because those things can look and even sound familiar, as you can imagine. It's a little bit of a tongue twister. When you care about someone, of course you want to help them. You want to support them. You want to be patient, and many of you have been. You want to understand what they've been through and what they're going through. Of course you are. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's normal. That's part of loving somebody. But there's a point where support can become responsibility. Patience can become waiting indefinitely. Understanding can become making excuses. And loyalty can become staying attached to something that, if you're honest, hasn't really been a functioning relationship for quite some time. That's why I wrote Care Without Carrying. Not because I think people should care less. Actually, on the contrary. I think caring is one of the best and the most important things about us. It's what makes us show up for people. It's what helps us get through difficult periods in our life. It's what holds families together when life gets hard. The problem isn't caring. The problem is when caring becomes disconnected from what's actually happening. So the book starts with a basic question. Does the relationship add up? And I know that sounds almost too simple, but people can spend years in relationships that don't add up because they're not looking at the whole thing together. They look at good conversations, the chemistry, the history, the difficult things the other person has gone through, the times when the person was affectionate, the times when they showed up, the times when the relationship felt like exactly what they always wanted. But they don't always place those moments beside everything else. Inconsistency, the distance, the lack of accountability, the promises that never really became behavior, the problems that kept getting discussed but never actually changed. You can't evaluate a relationship by selecting only the parts that support the outcome you actually want. You have to count everything. And once you start counting everything, you may realize that what began as caring has quietly become carrying. You're initiating most of the conversations. You're trying to repair every disagreement. You keep track of what needs to happen next. You're providing the emotional stability. You're handling the practical problems. You're making the financial sacrifices. You're trying to keep the connection alive while the other person decides from moment to moment how involved they would like to be. And because you love them, right, you may not call that carrying. You may call it commitment. You may call it being the stronger person. You may call it understanding that they're going through something. And sometimes that's exactly what it is. There are periods in every relationship where one person has to carry more. Someone gets sick, someone loses a job, someone experiences grief, someone becomes overwhelmed. Relationships are not always 50-50 every day. That's unrealistic. But temporary imbalance and permanent imbalance are not the same thing. In a temporary imbalance, the person receiving more still recognizes that the relationship belongs to both people. They communicate, they appreciate what's being done, they acknowledge the effect that their struggle is having on the other person. And when they're able, they begin moving back towards participation. Permanent imbalance is different. The same conversations keep happening, the same promises keep being made, the same disappointments keep following. You're not helping someone through a difficult season anymore. You've become the structure that allows them not to change. And that creates another problem. Your worth can slowly become connected to what you provide. You're valuable because you're useful, because you're dependable, because you solve problems, because you listen, because you forgive, because you remain calm, because you're the person who always comes back and puts everything together again. That can feel like love, especially when being needed creates closeness. Somebody may call you during a crisis. They may become emotionally open. They may tell you that you're the only person who understands them. They may depend on you in ways that feel very intimate. But being needed and being chosen are not always the same thing. Some people are deeply attached to what you do for them without being committed equally to you. You are, or you are the person who has so much care for them. The responsibilities that you hold should be theirs, but they become yours. So the question is whether the responsibilities of building with you is actually happening on the other side. And that can be hard to admit because it raises an uncomfortable question. If I stop doing this, what would remain? Would the person still move towards me? Would they still include me? Would I be a part of their life? Would they be a part of mine at all? Would they notice what I need? Would they participate without being directed? Would they still value me if I wasn't fixing, providing, organizing, reassuring, carrying? A lot of people don't want to find out that question or the answer to that question. So, what do? They keep giving because giving allows them to avoid the answer. Then there's inconsistency. And this is where a relationship can become extremely difficult to leave, even when it's not making you happy, because the reward doesn't arrive on schedule. The person isn't consistently affectionate. They aren't consistently available. They aren't consistently committed. But every once in a while, something happens for you. They become warm again. They say exactly what you've been waiting to hear all along. They show vulnerability. They return after a period of distance. You have incredible conversations. Maybe there's some sort of physical intimacy. Maybe they suddenly act like the person you have always believed is underneath everything. And for that moment, the whole relationship feels alive again. That emotional spike becomes powerful because it's unpredictable. You don't know when it's coming, so you keep hoping and waiting for it. And when it arrives, it doesn't just feel good. It feels like proof. It feels like for some Christmas. Proof that they care. Proof that the relationship is still there. Proof that your patience was worth it. Proof that the person you remembered hasn't disappeared. But a powerful moment is not necessarily a pattern at all. A person can mean everything they say in a moment and still be incapable of sustaining it. They can miss you and still not be prepared to participate. They can feel regret of what they did to you and still not be ready to change. They can return because they're lonely, frightened, nostalgic, or uncomfortable with losing access to you. That doesn't automatically mean they're manipulating you, but it also doesn't mean the relationship has changed. You have to watch what happens after the emotional moment. That's where the truth usually appears. That's where things add up to something or nothing. Does the person become more consistent? Do they accept responsibility? Do they repair differently? Do they behave well when there isn't a crisis? Do they remain involved after the fear of losing you has passed? Because the spike isn't the pattern. And sometimes we don't only mistake the spike for change, we mistake intensity for intimacy. A relationship can feel incredibly intense. You may think about the person constantly. You might check your phone for messages. You may feel anxious when their distance is and relieved when they return. You may experience jealousy, longing, desire, confusion, hope, fear, and excitement all within the same week. That's a lot of emotion. But a lot of emotion doesn't necessarily mean a lot of intimacy. Intimacy involves trust. Can I trust you with my heart? Can I trust you with my feelings? Can I trust you with me? Consistency. Being known. Being able to tell the truth. Being able to disagree without fearing that the entire relationship will disappear if we do. It involves two people who can remain present when things aren't dramatic. Intensity can make a relationship feel important because your nervous system is constantly activated. But peace may be a better measurement of intimacy than emotional chaos, although many of us move toward the latter. And that leads to another distinction that people don't always want to make. Wanting someone is not the same as liking the relationship you actually have with that person. You may want the person because they rejected you or constantly reject you and come back, because they become unavailable, because you've invested so much, because you can't accept that the story ended the way it did, because getting them back would seem to prove that you were valuable after all. Sometimes the desire becomes strongest after the relationship becomes least available. But if you take away the rejection, the chase, the confusion, and the need to prove something did actually enjoy or something you enjoyed while being with the person, or did you actually enjoy being with the person when you thought you did? Sounds confusing, right? Did you feel respected? Did you feel wanted? Did you feel emotionally safe? Could you be yourself? Did the relationship make your life better in a consistent way? Or did you spend most of your time trying to get back to the brief moments when everything felt good? Those are different questions. And eventually, the book turns the focus away from the other person because there's only so much growth that can come from diagnosing somebody else. You can spend years trying to decide whether they were avoidant, selfish, narcissistic, emotionally unavailable, whether they were, as people love to say, gaslighting you, wounded, or simply not interested. Some of those explanations may be accurate, but the most important question is still, what did the relationship actually do? What pattern did it create? And what part of that pattern did you continue to participate in? That isn't about blaming yourself for everything, no. It isn't about pretending both people always cause the same amount of harm. One person may have lied more, withdrawn more, taken more, broken more promises. But growth begins with the part that belongs to you because that's the part that you can change. What did you tolerate? What did you explain away? What did you already know but avoided accepting? Did you keep giving because you were generous or because giving made you feel necessary and important? Did you remain because you were loyal or because leaving felt like failure? Did you keep trying because the relationship was improving or because you couldn't accept that all of your effort might produce nothing or not what you wanted it to be? Those are hard questions, but they return authority to you. You may not be able to make someone love you differently. You may not be able to make affection become consistency. You may not be able to make regret become accountability. You may not be able to make another adult participate. But you can decide what you continue offering. And that brings the book to one of its central ideas. You can care at an 8 and give access at a 1. Your feelings and your decisions do not have to move at the same speed. You may still love somebody. You may still miss them. You may still understand why they behave the way they do. You may still remember the good. You may still wish the relationship had become something different. None of that automatically determines how much access they should continually be receiving from you. They may be emotionally important and still not trustworthy. They may be forgiven without being restored the same place in your life. You may wish them well without remaining available for every crisis. You may care deeply and still decide that contact keeps you trapped. That isn't punishment. Punishment withdraws in order to create a reaction. A boundary doesn't require one. Punishment says, I'm going to make you understand what you lost. A boundary says, I understand what continued access does to me. That's a major difference because many people reduce contact while still watching for a response. Will they notice? Will they miss me? Will they come back? Will they finally understand my value? The behavior has changed, but the person is still emotionally organizing their life around the other person's reaction. Real separation begins when the boundary remains valid, even if the other person never reacts. And none of this means becoming cold. That's not the answer. The answer is caring accurately. Caring accurately means counting the whole reality, the other person's wounds and the effects of their behavior, their good intentions and the patterns they create, the meaningful history and the present evidence, your sacrifices and your mistakes, your love and your limits. Nothing has to be erased. You don't have to turn the other person into a villain. You don't have to pretend the relationship meant nothing. You don't have to deny that you still care. You just stop allowing one true thing to erase everything else. You can say, this relationship mattered to me, and also say, it hurt me. You can say, they contributed, and also say, they withdrew in ways I can't continue accepting. You can say, I made sacrifices, and also say, I made mistakes. You can say, I still care, and also say, I'm no longer willing to carry the relationship alone. That isn't a contradiction. That's the complete truth. So that's why I wrote Care Without Carrying. It wasn't written to teach people how to care less, or one important thing which I didn't mention in the book about leaving marriages. Not at all. I believe what the Bible says about marriage and how sacred it is, and I 100% agree with what the Lord says about marriage and covenant. It wasn't written to make people suspicious of love or afraid of commitment. And it wasn't written to tell people to leave every time a relationship became difficult. It was written because some people have confused love with the responsibility to endure indefinitely. They've confused being needed with being chosen. They've confused intensity with intimacy. They've confused temporary emotional spike with a lasting pattern. They've confused understanding someone's pain with permission for that person to keep hurting them. And sometimes they've spent years protecting the relationship while slowly abandoning themselves in various ways. You are responsible for how you treat the person you love, but you are also responsible for what you allow love to make of you. Your heart isn't only something you give away, it's also something you're responsible for guarding. Not by placing it beyond reach, not by becoming hard, not by refusing to trust anyone, but by remaining honest and about the evidence, by allowing trust to grow from consistency, by allowing reciprocity to become visible, by refusing to do both people's parts and then calling the relationship a relationship. The person reading this book probably doesn't want to become less loving. They don't want to become colder. They don't want to stop believing in commitment. They simply understand that they need love too. They need care too. They need support too. And they need to remain present inside the life and the relationship they're working so hard to protect. The book is called Care Without Carrying. How to love deeply without losing yourself in an unequal relationship. It's available now on Kindle through Amazon. Or it is actually a Kindle book on Amazon, sorry. And if any part of this episode felt familiar, the book may help you put language around something you've been living with for a long time. Because the goal isn't to become the person who cares the least. It's to become the person whose care no longer requires them to disappear. I'm MCM, or Michael Charles Murray. Take care of yourself until next time.
This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus. Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder.